I still remember this story with absolute clarity, like a worn old reel that starts playing on its own whenever I walk past an alley, or someone suggests a game of hide and seek in the dark. The metallic damp of the parking lot, the rusty orange glow of the streetlights, the city's murmur braided into the early autumn chill. It's all still there. It was early October. My 3 siblings and I went to visit our mom at her new apartment in Riverton. I have an older sister, Nora, and 2 brothers, Luke and Ethan. Our parents had been divorced for 2 years, and we didn't see Mom often. In that sense, the visit felt like Dad's way of being a decent father. He didn't have to let us go, but he did. Mom's apartment was in Riverton's gray zone. Block after block, packed tight and yet somehow hollow, with twisty entrances like they were trying to hide. Along the side of the building ran a long, dark alley that the residents also used as a back entrance to the complex. Mom lived on the 2nd floor. Her place was small and warm, with a faint cinnamon smell. The old plush chair melted under your back, and the knickknacks everywhere reminded me of Grandma's house. On our last visit, we'd met the downstairs neighbors, Mason and Tasha. I hit it off fast with Mason. In the afternoons, the kids would play in the parking lot by the alley, tag, soccer, cops, and robbers. But that day, Mason came up with something more seasonal. With Halloween near, we should play hide and seek in the dark. Everyone agreed, and we set the time at exactly 9 p.m. Lights out, and we'd slither outside like a little raid. October drags dusk down early. By the time we gathered in the courtyard, the dark had pooled in every corner. The sodium lights overhead stained the parking lot a rusty orange, like we were seeing it through a dirty pane of glass. That night, it was me, Mason, Tasha, my sister Nora, and my brothers Luke and Ethan. As usual, before picking the seeker, we stood in a circle and chanted, "Bubblegum, bubblegum" in a dish. Result: Mason had to close his eyes and count while the rest of us scattered. The unspoken rule was not to go beyond the complex, but no one wanted to hide somewhere obvious. I stuck with Nora. Ever since we were little, I always followed her. She was the oldest, the calmest. The 2 of us ran along the side of the building, slipping between trash bags big as black beasts, aiming for the far end. Brush it, and the dew was cold as ice. We ducked fully into the alley, went far enough that the building's corner opened up, then crouched behind a row of big dumpsters. "No one's going to check all the way back here," she whispered. I nodded. The darkness wrapped around us like a thick blanket. Mason shouted, "Ready or not?" and his voice bounced around the concrete courtyard. At first, my heart pounded with excitement. The best part of the game is waiting to be found. But that thrill burnt out fast, leaving an unreasonable stillness. No giggles, no footsteps, only the wind whistling through the alley mouth and the clink of metal from a dumpster lid. Nora leaned to my ear. "It'll pass." A few minutes slid by. No one came. I started to fidget. Maybe we hid too well. She gave a small laugh and said we should head back. It was getting late. We stood up, brushed the grit off our knees, edged past the trash bags, and started back toward the middle of the alley. I looked up, and my heart dropped straight down. Under the only alley light, at the far end, someone was standing there. No, not someone we knew. Something was wrong with the proportions. He was too tall, as if there was something stuffed down the pant legs to add a few extra inches. The light shone straight down from above, making a blinding halo at his hairline and blotting out his face. And the hair, God, an enormous afro, streaked green, red, and yellow, like a clown wig. I gripped my sister's hand, my throat gone dry and raw. His outfit confirmed every worst suspicion. Oversized striped pants, A glossy jacket, a puffed ruff at the neck, white gloves. Only the face was dark as if smeared with black grease, a thick layer covering almost everything, leaving only the eyes. He stood motionless, turned squarely toward us. No routine, no goofy posing, no balloons or confetti. Just looking. My sister tugged me back. "Let's get to the others." We turned on our heels, moved along the wall, trying to keep our pace even, but our steps quickened with our pulse. Near the courtyard, we ran into Luke and Tasha. "What are you two doing out there?" Luke asked, thinking we were still playing. I blurted it out. My sister filled in, both of us pointing back toward the alley as we panted. There was a clown standing there. The four of us edged to the side of the wall to look, and that's when we realized it was worse than I thought. He had come closer. The distance was no longer a far-off shadow. Now I could see clearly the eyes stabbing through the blackened layer, bloodshot white catching the light. He raised a hand and gave a gentle wave. A slow, patient wave. Sickeningly so. Like greeting a child peering through a toy store window. A chill ran the length of my spine. Tasha suddenly shrieked, pointing across the dark patch of courtyard. "There's someone else." In the opposite corner, right along the wall, another figure stood. Also in clown getup. Hair a lurid green, legs unnervingly long in striped trousers. The two of them framed the ends of the alley, boxing us in between. No discussion needed. Tasha and Luke bolted, and my sister Nora and I sprinted after them. I heard shoes scuff and bounce on the concrete, felt my breath burning hot in my throat. Tasha slipped into her door while we tore up the stairs, cut down the hallway, and crashed into our mother's apartment. In the living room, Ethan was already there, babbling to Mom. She hugged us tight when she saw our faces, and I kept blinking, trying to blur the sharpness of what I'd just seen. Ethan, it turned out, had already had a run-in. He said he'd been hiding in the yard behind a bush, heard footsteps, and thought Mason was coming. He held his breath. A figure loomed right at the edge of the bush, so close Ethan could see a little tassel of fabric at the hem of a jacket. But from farther off, Mason's voice called, "Ethan!" He startled. Mason appeared from the opposite direction. "Gotcha?" Ethan looked up and stared straight into the face of a clown bending down, as if Ethan were a toy to be admired. The two of them had run to tell Mason's parents right then. Mom listened, sighed, stroked our hair, and murmured, "Okay," over and over like a spell. I thought that would be the end of it. But that night, the apartment didn't sleep with us. Close to midnight, I got thirsty. The little kitchen opened onto the city's darkness. The streetlight cast broken orange bands across the tile. I popped open the fridge for a bottle of water, and as I shut the door, I heard a faint tap, tap, like a fingernail on glass. I froze. Second floor, window latched. What was tapping? If I'd been thinking straight, I might have called Mom, but curiosity and a thin hope it was only a branch drew me over. I set my hand on the edge of the curtain, gave it a quick pull, and my face met the pane, nose to nose with another face pressed to the outside. Him, the big multicolored afro spilling over half his forehead, the glossy tar-black smear covering his face. Two eyes, too white to be normal, staring wide and unblinking, as if they'd been waiting for the precise instant the curtain opened just to catch my first reaction. The distance between us was only the thickness of the glass and a thin skin of air. I screamed, one broken, splintered sound, flung the bottle, and bolted back into my mother's room. Mom shot up immediately. I dragged her to the kitchen, my hands shaking nonstop. She stepped to the window, lifted the curtain, and of course, Like a scene in a horror movie, the glass was empty. The parking lot lay quiet. Wind hissed through the downspout. Mom set a hand on my shoulder and said she believed me, not doubting for even a second. She added another lock, called the building security to report strangers hanging around the alley. We dozed in fits till morning. Every faint metal ping became my heartbeat lodged at the base of my throat. The next morning, on our way down, I looked over the railing. Beneath the kitchen window, the wall had black, greasy smears like oil, streaking in the path of sliding hands. Beside the drain pipe were muddy brown shoe prints, scuffed up onto the brick ledge like makeshift steps. No one said anything, but everyone saw. I don't play hide and seek anymore. I avoid alleys the way you avoid a memory with claws. I don't know how he climbed. By the pipe, from the AC awning, or standing on someone's shoulders. I don't know why they were there, why they didn't wait for Halloween, why their faces were slathered in black instead of the gaudy painted grins from photos of other clowns. I only know we were lucky that night. It would be stupid to say nothing happened. Too much happened. It just didn't leave visible wounds. Sometimes, in early fall, when the orange light falls at just the right corner of a wall, I see that slow wave again, those motionless white eyes behind the black smear, and the feeling of being placed between two hunters, one in the alley, one by the edge of the yard, tightens around my chest. I tell myself it's only a memory, exaggerated. But memories have eyes of their own. And like that night in Riverton, they're still waiting for me to pull the curtain back. I was 11, in 6th grade, and this happened in the town of Brookdale, a place that reeked of rotting maple leaves in October, with wind knifing through steep streets and street lights the sickly color of a fever. My school sat across from a house so dilapidated that just glancing at it made you uneasy. Paint peeling off in scales like a snake's skin, the porch sagging, windows filmed over with dust so thick you couldn't tell if it was dark inside or just caked with grime. My friends would pass by making growling jokes, tossing pebbles at the rotting wooden fence. I kept hissing, shh, reminding them to keep it down or they'd anger the owner. Back then I was timid. So timid that just imagining an adult opening the door to yell was enough to choke me up. In early October, my friends started staying after school for clubs. Our schedules didn't line up, so I had to walk home alone. The familiar route suddenly felt much longer without anyone beside me. I remember that first Monday afternoon vividly. Cold wind scraping my ears, carrying the smell of damp trash and far-off wood smoke. As I passed the house, I kept my eyes on the sidewalk, and then stopped. In the ground floor window, a pane gone milky white with dust. There was a figure standing still. No wave, no movement, just standing there, facing the street. The feeble late afternoon light carved a shadow onto the back wall, turning the face into a featureless black hole. I picked up my pace. No footsteps behind me, no door opening, only my heartbeat thudding inside my jacket. The next day, and the next, it happened again. By the 5th day, I started telling myself, maybe it's only a scarecrow, an old coat hung up for Halloween. I told my friends, and they shrugged, said, it's just something to spook kids. I half believed it. Enough to keep going, not enough to feel truly at ease. Then, exactly a week before Halloween, Brookdale got hit with a downpour, the pavement slick as black glass. I left late. The music class had play practice. Dusk was closing in. When I reached the house, I looked up. My insides clenched. The figure wasn't in the window anymore. He was on the porch. Tall, too tall, as if someone had tried to add a few inches with thick-soled shoes. A dark cloak hung soaked and clinging to his body. He was turned fully toward me, motionless, as if he'd been waiting. I told myself, just walk, don't show fear. I forced my legs to move. Rainwater poured in strings from the roof onto the wooden steps, tick, 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 like a countdown. As I passed the gate, he lunged down the steps. Wood creaked and cracked. Footfalls slapped the wet sidewalk. I screamed, my mind emptied to two commands: run and breathe. He shouted nonsense, each word ground out like it was being crushed between his teeth, making my skin crawl. The distance shrank. I could feel hot breath mixing rust and mildew at the back of my neck. I cut into a narrow alley wedged between two storage buildings where the streetlights couldn't reach. Trash had pooled into slick patches. The walls were furred with moss. At the end of the alley stood a metal dumpster up to my chest. I slid behind it, pressed my back to the wall, hands clamped on the rim. My whole body shook. I flattened my chest to muffle my breathing and listened. Footsteps slowed at the mouth of the alley. Stopped. Changed direction. Scuff. Scuff. The scrape of soles dragging over wet concrete, drawing closer. I could even hear him muttering, not continuous speech, but a string of broken sounds, repeating like a warped incantation. His shadow slid along the opposite wall, stretching and shrinking with each step. He stopped right on the other side of the dumpster. I could measure the distance by my heartbeat. 1, 2, 3. His breathing hissed, rapid, breaking into an ugly wheeze. If he so much as leaned his head over the rim, everything would be over. Then suddenly, he whipped around. Footfalls pounded away, smacking into puddles and spraying water, fading from the alley. I still didn't move. 5 more breaths. 10, 20. When I dared to lift myself up, my knees were numb. I shot out from my hiding place, bolted onto the street, and ran without looking back until my hand closed around my own front door knob. In the kitchen, the neon light was stark white. My mom turned around, and before she could ask a word, it all came flooding out of me like a burst dam. My dad dialed 911 the moment he heard the word chasing. 20 minutes. They said they'd be there in 20 minutes. But to me, that was an eternity. I sat on the sofa, both hands wrapped around the mug of hot cocoa my mom gave me. It didn't warm me. It only reminded me that I was still here in our house, alive. The officer arrived and took careful notes. They asked me to describe him: how tall, what he wore, what his voice sounded like, which direction he ran. They asked about the house. I pointed, right across from the school, sagging roof, dusty windows. They nodded and said they'd go back in the morning. That night I slept on the couch, jerking awake at every small sound, the pipes knocking, wind scratching the roof, the fridge humming. Every noise turned into footsteps. The next day, they knocked close to noon. The officer's face looked a little older than it had the night before, heavier. "No one lives in that house," he said. "It's been abandoned for a long time." The words poured a cold seam straight down my back. If no one lived there, then who was the person who'd stood in the window frame all week? Who opened the door, came down the porch, chased me, and breathed hard right behind the dumpster? They said it might have been a homeless person or someone squatting in the abandoned place, wandering around to get out of the rain. Maybe he just wanted to scare you, they added. That maybe didn't help. It only opened a deep well of other, worse possibilities. My friends, the ones who used to laugh, howl pretend wolf calls, and throw rocks when they heard my story, some gaped and some flushed. No one joked anymore. They said, "Oh my God, I can't believe it." You were lucky. I nodded, pressed my lips into a smile because I was safe. But inside, a small needle had lodged itself. From that day on, every peeling house had eyes. Every dust-filmed window held a silhouette. Every alley contained a wheezing chest waiting for you to run past. I'm 22 now, long gone from Brookdale, living in another city with brighter streets and more patrol cars. But whenever October hangs that cold smell outside the window, whenever I have to pass a row of abandoned houses or catch sight of a cloudy pane of glass, I hear those footsteps stomping through puddles again, hear that wheeze right at my ear, and see that long shadow sliding along the alley wall. I don't know who he was, where he came from, why he picked me, and maybe I don't want to know. Some doors, once shut, are better left alone. But if you ask what I learned from that wet, cold afternoon, it's this. Abandoned houses are rarely empty. They're full of things you don't see. And sometimes, those things know how to look back. I grew up in a small village in a Bavarian valley, where Catholicism clings as deeply as pine roots on a mountainside. Halloween isn't exactly welcomed here. Adults call it a foreign fad, best not to get mixed up in. Even so, in recent years, a few pumpkins have appeared on porches, and some people even carve lanterns to set before the Virgin Mary statue. I keep a different habit. Every evening I take Bruno, my big mixed-breed dog with a thick neck and a cranky temperament, out for a walk. Walking him by day is a nightmare. Bruno hates children and bicycles. The moment he sees either he barks, pulls, bares his teeth. In autumn, the night falls fast. By 8, it feels like midnight. Without streetlights, you can barely see anything but a solid block of black. My favorite route is the little road that runs from the village's only convenience store to the parish church. About a 10-minute walk. On one side is the edge of an oak forest, on the other, a large horse farm. At night, the road is so empty, it's as if someone has lifted it off the map. It's rare to meet a soul. I love the cold brushing my skin, the crunch of dry leaves under my soles, the smell of damp earth, the evocative solitude. I was walking just like that evening, lost in thought, until I neared the end of the road, where the forest meets an old stable that once belonged to the parish, abandoned since before I was born. Bruno suddenly bristled. He growled, barked hoarsely, yanked so hard at the lead, it felt like it might snap. I scanned for whatever usually sets him off, a bike, a stray dog. But he fixed his stare only at the line of trees behind that rickety stable. The light there, thrown from an old lamppost, was as dim as dying embers. The overlapping leaves wove a gray curtain. Bruno, normally stubborn but not crazy, was boiling over like something had jabbed him. I pressed my lips together, raised my flashlight, and swept it lightly into the dark. At first, I thought I was just seeing things. A bush, a post, something harmless. Then my eyes adjusted to the black, and the shape clarified. About 15 meters away, right behind the stable, someone was there. They were kneeling, back straight, arms hanging at their sides, neither hiding nor stepping out, as if suspended in a state between concealment and display. Cold moonlight slid off the edge of the tin roof and stuck to their clothing in a pale silver smear. White, a white that ran from head to heel. A cloak? A long coat? Impossible to tell. They didn't move, didn't bow their head. They were looking toward me. I tugged the lead gently, signaling Bruno to go. But he rooted himself, neck taut like a drawn bowstring. At the nape of my neck, it felt as if someone had set a cold fingertip there. I forced my breathing to stay even, gripped the chest harness on Bruno, and decided to leave. To walk quickly, but not run. Instinct told me that if I panicked, the person would know I'd seen them. Fortunately, the church bell tower was just ahead. Under the pale yellow lights stood 2 or 3 parishioners lingering after evening mass, chatting. I briefly thought of hurrying over to tell them, but a foolish question thudded in my head. Tell them what? That someone is kneeling in the dark? I swallowed and led Bruno on at a brisk pace. The walk home was the longest of my life, even though it was only a few minutes. Every couple dozen steps I looked back, trying to pierce the darkness to see if anyone was following. Bruno, normally curious about everything, went silent. He didn't sniff the air or glance around, just barreled straight ahead, his claws skimming the asphalt with a noise that made my skin crawl. When I got home, I threw every lock, telling myself I'd tell my parents tomorrow, tell the parish priest, tell someone. But it was like my mouth had been taped shut by something invisible. I just wanted to forget. That night, I was torn out of sleep by a barrage of sirens. The wail went on and on, rising from the edge of the woods, plucking my nerves like strings. Fire engines, police, a full half hour of it. Smoke crept in through the window gaps, even though our house is at the far end of the village. The local news came on the next morning, already full of images. Flames licking the tin roof, a black column of smoke swallowing the area around the stable. The anchor said it was suspected arson. Maybe some drunk teenagers pulling a holiday prank. That's what they said. But I knew. The giggles of kids don't linger in your head, like a silence that stretches into forever. As the anchor moved on, I barely heard the words. I just stared at the frame where the burned-out skeleton of the stable showed through. From the moment I saw the person in white kneeling behind the trees to when the fire flared up, at least 5 or 6 hours had passed. What did that mean? Did it mean they'd knelt there all night, waiting for the exact moment? Or that they left and came back? Or that there were others in the shadows, keeping a lighter and a can of gasoline, waiting for some invisible signal? The thought fell into my stomach like a cold pebble and spread out along my ribs. All day I was haunted by an unanswerable question. If Bruno hadn't dragged me away, if I'd given in and taken a few more steps to get a better look, would the story have ended at a stare? The image of that person, a white figure still as a statue, kneeling at the edge of the light, wasn't frightening in the jump scare way. It was terrifying for its unnatural calm, the sort of stillness you only see in people who have already decided what they're going to do. That evening, I avoided the road to the church and took the longer route along the beet fields. Bruno seemed glad of it too. Now and then, he still jerked the leash when he heard the rasp of a bicycle on gravel. But sometimes, right in the middle of our walk, he'd freeze, ears pricking toward the forest as if he'd remembered something. I didn't look. I didn't want to know. I didn't want to count how many jack-o'-lanterns still burned on stoops or hear adults confidently debating paganism. On some nights, those labels lose all meaning. All that's left is the cold from a pair of eyes with no face, staring and staring. I can't prove anything, and I don't intend to add more bricks to the wall of prejudice that says Halloween equals evil. But the truth doesn't need me to embellish it. There was a person in a white cloak kneeling at the forest's edge, just beyond the streetlight circle, looking toward me as if waiting. And then, many hours later, the stable went up in flames. If that person, or rather those people, were calm enough to burn down an entire building, I don't want to know what else they're willing to do. All I know is that night, Bruno pulled me out of the cold wake of an intent that, even now, makes my palms sweat when I think of it.